Hello and welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm going to be teaching vibe coding with Cursor for beginners. With that said, whether you're completely new to Cursor or you've been using it for some time, the purpose of this video is to help you learn some of the basic fundamental principles of using Cursor, some of which I didn't know until just recently. Cursor is actually the #1 AI coding tool, and some companies are even requiring its use in Office. Gone are the days where vibe coding or coding with AI was frowned upon. As the models continually get better and better, and the end product, like tools like Cursor, are getting continuously better, these tools are the future. So there's never been a better time for you to start learning or continuing to sharpen your skills with AI coding tools like Cursor. Right now on the BridgeMind YouTube channel, we have a series where I'm vibe coding an app until I make $1 million. Just last week, I published my first app goalpost without having to write a single line of code myself. That being said, my point with this is that whether you have a ton of programming experience or no coding experience, the way of programming is evolving, and coding with AI is shaping the future. So there really has never been a better time to learn than right now. The first thing that I want to cover is what actually is Cursor. So Cursor is essentially just an AI-powered version of Visual Studio Code. And that's what it is. It's built on top of Visual Studio Code. Here I just pulled up my project in Visual Studio Code, and Visual Studio Code was the most popular code editor for many, many years, and it still is. But Cursor is now rising in the ranks, and the reason that it has is simply because of its AI integration into the programming flow. So instead of just having a raw code editor, you can now toggle an AI pane here up in the top right. You can see toggle AI pane, and you can even open it with, what is that? It's Option Command B. So if you just do Option Command B on a Mac, you can toggle that pane and open it up. And here you're going to see essentially ChatGPT or an AI assistant pane inside of your code editor. And what's great about Cursor is that they have ask functionality, meaning that you can ask Cursor questions about your code base, or you can actually have an agent take actions on behalf. And this was really the game changer for Cursor. So it used to be they only had this ask feature where you would essentially drag and drop files, which is what you can do. So there's two ways of being able to share context of your project with Cursor. One, you can drag and drop, so you can just drag and drop files over here. So if I want to make changes, for example, to a calendar component or a certain page, you can drag and drop. And what that does is it essentially focuses Cursor in on that specific file, because it's the same as essentially copying and pasting code into ChatGPT, which is what a lot of vibe coders used to have to do, was they would have ChatGPT open in one window and then Visual Studio Code open in another. But now it's actually embedded inside of the editor itself. So another way that you can also reference files is if you do Shift-@, if you do an @ symbol, you can actually pull up and search for any file across your code base. So if you know the name of a file and you want to pull it up, and this is the feed screen, so over here, you can see that here's our feed screen. If I wanted to make any changes to the feed screen, I could just by doing @feed screen. But what's interesting about Cursor is you don't actually have to drag and drop the files into the text editor for it to be able to know what file you're talking about. What's interesting about Cursor is it can actually grep your code base. And what grepping is means that it can actually search on your code base to find the file you're talking about. So let me show you how this works. So let me say, and I'm going to use Whisperflow here, take a look at the feed goal card in the feed screen and help me figure out how to make the borders a little bit more stand out a little bit more. So you can drop that in, and we're just going to submit this prompt, and I'm going to show you guys what this does. So we're using GPT-5 High Fast, and here is the model selector. And what it does is you can see here that it immediately thought for 6 seconds, and then it said, let me open the feed goal card component to see how its border styles are currently configured. And I actually don't want to make these changes, but I'm just going to stop it right here because I want to show you what process it just went through so you can understand how Cursor works. So I made this request. Take a look at the feed goal card in the feed screen and help me figure out how to make the borders a little bit more stand out, which is terrible English. My apologies, but The AI doesn't need it. So think about this. I didn't drop in any files. I didn't have to add in any context. And what you can see is it thought for 6 seconds, and then it was able to grep or search the code base to find the feed goal card component. It found that, and then it thought for another 4 seconds to think through how is the styling configured in this component. And then what it did is it found that the styling is coming from a colors.ts file. And my point with this is that something that's very important for you to understand about Cursor is that it has full context and understanding of your code base, not through storing it and passing it all in as one prompt, but through having tools and the capabilities to be able to search your code base in real time. So that instead of having to copy and paste a bunch of different files or reference a bunch of different files, the AI agent is actually able to make searches, and based on those searches, make additional searches. So that's one very important thing to understand about Cursor. The next thing that I want to teach you is a little bit about model selection. And to do that, we need to open up our settings so that I can show you how to turn on or off different models in Cursor so that you can actually select them. So first off, you can see here in the AI pane, you have the option to be able to select any different model that you want to submit a specific prompt. And you can change this however you want throughout any essentially conversation that you're having with Cursor. So even though we used GPT-5 High Fast for that last prompt, we can change it to Claude 4 Sonnet for this next prompt. But with that being said, let's go up here to the top right corner and select our settings. And what you're going to see here is in the left sidebar here, there's a models, 4 down, it's models. And this is where you can actually toggle on and off specific models that are going to show up here in your AI pane. And some of these models are actually not turned on by default. So it's very important that when new models come out that you check this models tab to make sure that you have turned on or off specific models. So you can see Grok 3 is turned on here. There's a new model, Sonic, that just came out this week that I believe that is created by Cursor. But I've toggled on and off a lot of models, but I can control what models are actually going to be accessible to me in the AI pane here if I just click off, 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 on. You guys get the gist. Something very important to understand about Cursor as well is that there's essentially 3 different modes to these models. So you can see here that for Claude 4 Sonnet in particular, that there's a lot of different models just for Claude 4 Sonnet. So let me explain this. So what's the difference between this Claude 4 Sonnet here and this Claude 4 Sonnet here? Well, the answer is right in front of us, this little brain icon. And this brain icon, Cursor uses to specify whether this is a thinking model or it's not a thinking model. So this Claude 4 Sonnet without the brain is going to be Claude 4 Sonnet without thinking enabled. It's going to be a little bit faster, it's going to be cheaper, but it may not be able to get you the answer that you want. But this one is going to be more accurate. It's going to take a little bit longer to come up with its responses, but it's going to be able to gather more context. And usually the thinking models do much better than the not thinking models. Now, what about this max mode? So if we go down here, there's a lot of different models that, for example, you have this Claude 4 Sonnet with the brain, and then to be able to toggle max, you just click max. And what you're going to see is it's kind of highlights it with a flowing gradient. And what this does is it gathers even more context and even more cost. Just be aware that when you do use max mode, it can get expensive, but it's going to gather more context. And Cursor has even enabled for people that aren't worried about cost, things like this, Claude 4 Sonnet 1M, which is their 1 million token context model. So they have a lot of models available, and it's very important to understand which models to use in which scenarios. So for example, if I wanted to change the color of this default icon here, I wouldn't want to use a super expensive model that gathered a bunch of context, if you get what I'm saying, because it's a very simple feature. Changing the color of a default icon is not a feature that needs a bunch of context. You can use a model that doesn't gather as much context so that you don't run up your bill and your usage costs with Cursor. So something to keep in mind is that you always need to be thoughtful of how much money you're spending on Cursor. For example, I've spent $500 this month on Cursor, but that's because I'm a Cursor super user. I spend a ton of my time programming and I use Cursor all the time. So I'm willing to enable models like the 1M model to do more work because it's able to actually accomplish more tasks. But if you're changing subtle features, you don't need to use the more complicated, expensive models. Use something like Claude Sonnet without thinking and without max mode turned on if you're doing something simple. But if you're working on a feature that, for example, spans the front end, an API, and a database, then it's smart to turn on something like Claude for thinking. When you're really being serious about what you're building, you can use some of the 1M models, but be mindful that it is very, very expensive. Also note that there is a very big difference now with GPT-5 in the mix. GPT-5 is now one of the best and most affordable models on the market. And the reason is because it's a very, very affordable model. Comparing GPT-5 with Claude 4.1 Opus, it's 10 times cheaper. So you need to do your research on which models you're using because your costs can easily rack up when you're using Cursor, or your usage limits can easily rack up to the point where you're already hitting usage limits 1 week in. It's something that I see a lot from my subscribers. So definitely important to understand that you can toggle on and off different models here in your Cursor settings so that they show up here. And it's also important to understand which models you're using for different prompts. You don't just want to select a model and decide that you're going to use that model throughout an entire conversation that you're having with Cursor. You want to be able to adjust it prompt by prompt so that you're not running up unnecessary expenses. An additional thing that's critical when using Cursor is to make sure that your chat settings are configured correctly. I'm going to be sharing mine on bridgemind.ai once we launch on September 1st. You can learn more about this in the description below. But I'll be showing you on this video what my chat settings actually look like. So take a look at the chat. Right here, it's 2 down, 1 below general. And here is where you can set your default mode for chat, whether you want it to default to using agent, ask, or your last used mode. I set mine to agent because when I open up new chat panes, I usually am working with the code. So I just enable agent by default because I want to be editing code. The next thing is where to open chats. You can select editor or pane. I select pane because that kind of gives it the side look that you're seeing here. That's what I use. Text size is just whether you want your text. I just do default for that. The next thing is display. I use compact. Another important thing is the auto clear. So after periods of inactivity, open the pane to a new chat. I have this on. Scroll to new messages, I keep on. Completion sound is important because if you don't have this off, let's say that you're working on multiple chats at once, which is another critical thing to understand. I'm going to open this up a little bit more. You can see that I have 3 chats open at once. And what's great about Cursor is that you can literally be working on multiple features at the same time. If you look here, I could make a prompt here, and then I could make a prompt over here, and then using Command T, I could open up a new chat and make an additional prompt, and you can simultaneously have 3 AI agents working on different parts of your code base at a single time. And once those complete, like let's say I was over working on this 3rd chat, I want to have this completion sound on so that I know when one of these chats is actually complete. It'll make that sound so I know, okay, one of my tabs has completed. Let's go follow up and check that feature, how it's looking, and make sure that I can prompt it additionally or not, or just do the next best thing. One of the most important settings is this to-do list settings. This was a crazy feature when they released it just about a month ago. And what this does is that when you're working on a specific complex piece of functionality, like let's say let's just do it now so I can show you guys what this looks like. So let's turn on Claude Sonnet thinking, and let's just use max, right? So I'm going to say I have a big feature that I need you to build for me. The first step of this is I need you to review the entirety of my front end to understand the styling. And then I need you to create a new screen in the settings page that will link to the user's subscription so that they can see that functionality. I then need you to go to the API and create the API route to submit this functionality. I need you to actually code the new API route to build this functionality. Then I need you to go back to the front end and update the service to be able to integrate with this new API endpoint. And then I need you to build the UI for it. So we're not actually going to build this feature, but I'm just going to show you what this looks like. So we're going to submit this, and I know for a fact that it's going to think about this, and then what it's going to do, because I have this to-do list enabled, is it's going to actually get a to-do list. So immediately, you guys can see here, to-dos, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to-dos. So let's click stop here, or you can do Control-C to stop a chat. But when you're working with a complex feature, what Cursor did is they enabled the logic for the AI to actually think through a to-do list. And what ends up happening is it actually will go through this to-do list step by step, and it will check it off as it's completed before continuing on to the next feature. And what's great about this is most of the time, it understands what order things actually need to be updated in, which is great. So make sure you have this to-do list toggled on. It's very important. Another couple things is some less important things, but you can choose on whether or not you want to queue next messages. So let's say, for example, take a look again. I'm just going to type that. But then if you click that, so let's stop here so I can just show you guys what happened. So I made a prompt, and then you guys can see that it was thinking for about a second. But then I entered test down here, and you can see that it didn't immediately send that prompt. It actually queued it. And that's very helpful because sometimes I'll be working on a big project and I'll understand that I'm working on a lot of different things, and some of the code that I'm writing takes a while for Cursor to actually build it because it's so complex. So it'll be making to-do lists and going through the to-do list and coding and making updates, but I can still be over here and working on my app and finding other bugs and being able to submit more prompts and just queue them, which is great because I don't have to then wait just for that prompt to end and that project to end to then submit a new prompt. I can just queue all these prompts. So this is really important. I have it turned on. There's a couple other things that we can do. The web search tool, I enable this because it allows you, let's say if you're working with an API documentation like Stripe or something like that. What's great about this is sometimes when you have this enabled, before even starting work on that API, it'll actually make a web search to that API's documentation. So I toggle that on. It's pretty important. You can also toggle on include full folder context. So allow full content of the selected folder to be included in the context. I don't include this, turn this on because it can get expensive. But if you're not worried about cost, then don't worry about it. And here, this actually brings me into the next subject that we're going to talk about. You can see here hierarchical cursor ignore. So apply .cursor ignore files to all subdirectories. So it's really important for you to include a cursor ignore file, just like you would include a git ignore file if you don't want certain sensitive information being shared with the model. I do this for like my .env just so that I'm not constantly submitting sensitive API keys. So make sure that you have a cursor ignore file in your projects when you're using Cursor. And then that also, let's talk about your actual cursor rules file. So this is one of the most talked about functionalities, but let's search it up. So cursor rules, I believe, so I actually recently removed these. And the reason I did it is because I wanted to show you guys what building one of these actually looks like. So what's nice about Cursor is, I guess I have it here in my API. So this cursor rules file. So I want to show you what the process of actually building one of these is. So let's expand this a little bit. But what's cool is that you can nest .cursor rules files inside of Cursor. And what cursor rules files are is whenever you have a cursor rules file, it's going to actually be almost an additional layer of a prompt without you having to actually send it. So you can see here in my cursor rules file here, I have golden rules. Number 1 is type safety. Number 2 is module architecture. Number 3 is DTO and validation. Number 4 is error handling. Number 5 is database and migrations, so on and so on. And what this is these are actually explanations of my project and how I want it as the developer to work. And by defining these, it makes sure that Cursor stays in line without me having to continually tell it to stay in line in these ways. So, for example, you can create one of these files very easily if you, let's go here and I'm just going to delete this cursor rules file in our database directory, and let's drag in the entire database directory. Actually, let's do a Command T and launch a new window, drop in the entire database directory. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, take a look at our database directory and think deeply about how our project is structured, the best practices that it implements, and how it's organized. Please then write a robust cursor rules files and embed it at the base root of the project with all the best practices to make sure that Cursor stays in line while I'm working with it. So just by doing that and writing a prompt like that, you can then submit this and you can have Cursor then think through what your project looks like and actually build a cursor rules file for itself. And that's actually how I personally build all my cursor rules files. I know what the best practices are. I start those best practices alongside Cursor in the beginning, and then once I start to implement those best practices, I actually start to build them, and then I create the cursor rules file for it to continually build upon those best practices. So right now it's reading through all of our code to be able to understand how it's structured and what it should look like. I'm going to pause it because I don't want to spend too much time building this out, but you guys get the point. It made the to-dos, it thinks through the patterns, and I guess it's going to create it right now, so we'll let it do its work. But just like that, we have a very comprehensive cursor rules file, which is going to help us make it so that our project doesn't get out of hand down the line, so that Cursor's always building upon certain best practice principles. All right, so Cursor finished outputting the cursor rules file, and believe it or not, it's 648 lines long, and it describes every single part of our entire code base so that Cursor truly understands how it's structured and how to follow the exact patterns so it never gets crazy on you. But this looks really good. 648 lines, which is great. But that's the best way to kind of keep your code structured, is to create a cursor rules file. And I like to actually use Cursor to build the cursor rules file because nobody builds a cursor rules file better than Cursor itself. That's going to bring us to the end of this video. Please make sure that you subscribe and like the video if you haven't done so already for more content on how to learn how to code using AI. With that being said, on September 1st, we're launching our first course on bridgemind.ai for you to learn how to use Cursor and how to learn how to code using AI. Subscriptions start at $9.99 a month, and that's coming, like I said, on September 1st. So I'm really excited for that. And that's going to be quizzes, content that you can actually read. So you're going to have content part of the module, you're going to have a quiz part of the module, and you're even going to have special assignments to be able to earn AI certification. So with that said, thanks again so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.